What is up, guys? Hey, Michael Clark here, co-founder, CEO here of BAM Weather, and we're back for another week here of Beyond the Forecast. And I'm excited today because we have a guest today, and our guest is Mike Matranga, and he's a former U.S. Secret Service special agent, nationally recognized security strategist, and is the founder and CEO of M6 Global Defense, a firm delivering advanced proactive intelligence, risk management, and emergency preparedness solutions for schools, universities, Fortune class corporations, and all the things. 2 decades of federal experience, including roles in Presidential Protective Division and the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Mike also pioneered one of the nation's top-ranked K-12 security programs at Texas City ISD, influencing Texas school safety legislation. Today, Mike joins us to discuss innovative threat intelligence solutions and how weather factors into emergency preparedness and risk management solutions. So, man, I'm pumped, Mike, to have a guy like you on the show. I appreciate you taking time out of your day.
Yeah, you're. I think that you're easily entertained and impressed. So from here on out, the viewers should know that they will call us M Square
Okay.
when we do future podcasts. So it's Mike and Mike at this point. So,
Yes.
no, honored to be here. I appreciate it. Hopefully we have some good conversation about proactive and preventative measures and, how we can educate individuals that are in these very important and critical roles to command and control, to have the right information and the right tools to do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Mike. And I tell you, one thing I love, at least, Brett and I, we have a reputation of probably saying more than we should a lot of times, but we like to just say it how it is, man. I know just from listening to you and getting to know you a couple weeks ago, you are the same way. And I really kind of wanted to I wanted to get your expert opinion, your view, your lens on some things as you see it, as it pertains to first topic I want to bring up is really the importance of taking preventative or proactive measures, obviously not only in weather, but in just emergency situations in general. Because I feel like we have a lot of customers, client bases in schools, universities, and things that involve fans and spectators and, athletes and those types of things. And I feel like even to this day, now more than ever, people are so reactive. It's such an approach of, well, once it happens, we'll deal with it. And I feel like this mentality is, it's just so dangerous. And Mike, I would be curious to know a little bit more maybe it is why you think that people are so reactive versus being proactive. Like, what's the reason behind this?
I think it's the American way. I think for so long we haven't dealt with the threats that we're facing now in a modern society. And in the past, what got us by was having a very strong reactive plan, based upon law enforcement's response. And the fact of the matter is that these incidents, whether they be weather incidents or whether they be man-made incidents like mass shootings, they are on the rise, right? And we are seeing them more frequent. Our weather patterns have changed. Our behavioral patterns in American society have changed with the evolution of technology and social media. People are more emboldened now than they've ever been because they have a platform or multiple platforms to do that. And I've said this multiple times over the last several years, and it's kind of got me in a little bit of hot water. And it's not meant to be derogatory or disparaging at all towards our law enforcement, because we absolutely love them. We need them. But at the end of the day, we cannot continue to think that law enforcement alone can resolve these problems, right? If you take into consideration even a weather incident, an active shooting incident, there's something that occurs. Weather incidents are a little bit easier because you kind of know when they're coming. But active shooting events, we also know when they're coming, but we're failing to engage from the preventative and proactive side by identifying that leakage in these particular types of incidents and then intervening. So what I'm getting at is, for decades, if you look back in the 80s, 90s, law enforcement in schools was utilized to thwart the increased drug epidemic that we had in the United States. And then that job of a DARE officer has now evolved into a school resource officer to address multiple different types of threats, whether it be criminal behavior or whether it be assaultive or homicidal behavior, or even suicidal behavior. The fact is that our law enforcement officers can't do it all. We have to, as people, as parents, as staff, as friends of parents of, kids that have friends that are experiencing these types of behaviors, we have to get engaged. We have to intervene early. We have to look for these grievances that are always there, these signs of leakage that are always there. It's that preventative and proactive manner. And the same thing applies to weather, right? One of the guys on our team, used to be on our team, he's now the Houston fire chief, Tom Munoz. He said it best several years ago, is, with active shootings and events like this, it's hard, right? It's harder than a weather incident because we live on the Texas Gulf Coast. We know that, 72, 96 hours out that we have bad weather coming, if there's a hurricane or a tropical storm or things like that. It allows us that time to build in a plan, right? Whereas with some of these other man-made events, mass shootings and suicides and things like that, we don't always know when they're going to happen. We just have to be better at identifying them. It's like I don't know how to explain this, but it's like behavioral patterns are the same as weather patterns, right? We can predict them. Why are we not doing a better job doing that?
Yeah, what a great question. And I think it kind of leads me into what I want to ask you next is, why do we not challenge that a little bit more? If we know these patterns are predictable, when you and I met a couple weeks ago, you were even saying, gosh, there are precursors to people that are going to shoot people. There are precursors to, and I know this isn't necessarily the same, but it kind of is in a sense of safety and catastrophic, damages and loss and stuff. Is there are precursor to tornado outbreaks and lightning storms. And so if I'm in a seat of a superintendent or VP of operations or whatever I am in these schools, what can we do to get people to be more forward thinking? Of why are we waiting for something bad to happen versus,
Well, I think that's a big question, and there's a lot of reasons why. The fact is that my wife's a teacher. She's been a teacher for 25 years. So I'm very familiar with the educational environment, having been a former administrator and then eventually a school board member. I think that education, whether it be public or private, so many of these individuals that are in these positions of trust and leadership, they're wearing 15 different hats, and they can only focus
that's a
on
great point.
what they can do. And what this reminds me of is when I was going through special agent training 21 years ago now. When we got to our module of learning how to do protective advance work, the instructor cadre just simply didn't have enough instructors to fill the void and meet all of the specific areas, right? Because you have like a transportation agent, you have a hotel agent, like what we call an RON agent, you have a site agent, you have a lead, you have a law enforcement counterpart, you have all these different roles, right? And so they didn't have enough people to fill in all those roles. So we would be talking to an instructor that, for example, was our transportation lead, and then we would need to ask a question to the RON agent or the lead agent over the whole site, and they didn't have someone to fill in, so he would pretend like, okay, let me put on my lead hat, right? And then, okay, ask me your questions that you would ask your lead. So my point is that education in the industry just simply doesn't have enough people to be able to prioritize and focus on safety and security full time, right? And so I'm the vice chairman of the National Council for School Safety Directors, NCSSD. Um, our goal and mission is to create a position and articulate the reason why in every school district and every university in America, so that there's that one person there that's their sole job. That's what they focus on, is the life safety of the staff and the students. And so that's one part. I think the other part is that we're not considering the state in which politics plays into these decisions that are being made. And, not to get political, but we have to, right? We have to be very direct, and we have to talk about these things. I'm never afraid to talk about the things that others don't want to talk about. The fact of the matter is that, based upon where you live in the United States, safety and security is either very welcome or it can be turned away. And people say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, if you look at just a couple years ago, there was this, movement throughout the United States to eradicate school resource officers on a lot of campuses, primarily in blue states. And I think what we're seeing now is that they were realizing that that was a terrible mistake, that they should not have done that, right?
Yep.
Because there was this vacuum of a mass exodus of SROs, which absolutely contribute to the culture and climate on those campuses, because we're living in a more violent society. And then they realized, hey, we don't have anybody here from a law enforcement perspective to handle that. But with that said, there are states like my own state that we're looking at security as a policing approach, or with a policing approach, instead of a security proactive and preventative approach, by taking data from historical events that we already know from the National Threat Assessment Center and from the FBI's BAU, and utilizing that as our basic foundation on how we move forward in prioritizing. And I think that's the thing, is the industry has grown so fast, let's say since 2018, right? And it's become a $3 billion industry. K-12 security has become a $3 billion industry. And you've got a ton of companies that are trying to sell you products instead of trying to break down the people component, because it's the people that are going to make the decisions to either act or not act, right?
Yes.
And so we have to get to a point, and it's like what we do at my company. We break everything down into what we call the 3 F's. And I'm the grandson of a carpenter, and so I learned a lot from my grandfather. And I'm a spiritual man too. You can't build a house on sand, right? You need to build it on a strong foundation.
Dude,
And
I
so
love that saying. By the way, I love
the
that
3
saying.
F's are the foundation, the framework, the finishes. You don't install crown molding on a wall that's built on sand. You build that on a solid foundation, then you establish your walls, framework, and then you go to your finishes. And so what I mean by that is we have to look at this from a priority and a proactive and preventative standpoint. Is what's the foundation? That's the communications. That's the analysis of behavior. That's having things in place that identify those behaviors and having protocols on how to intervene to get that person off the pathway to violence, or having mechanisms like BAM weather involved in or as a force multiplier, so that we can make better informed decisions. And I think the most important thing is that the people that are making these decisions need to be qualified. School after school after school, we go in and it's like, hey, who's your security director? Well, it's the wrestling coach, or it's the baseball coach who's been promoted to this, and he's one of those guys that's wearing that 15th hat.
Yep.
But he has no, or she has no foundational experience in this stuff. And
Yep.
so we have to get back to those logical decisions and invest in the people. Listen, technology is phenomenal. We absolutely need technology. I think that there is a need now more than ever to have a combination of people and technology. That's really the key, right?
Yep.
To
Yep.
help us make better informed decisions. I know that was very long, but
No, dude,
there's a lot
it's
to unpack there. It was a broad question.
no, for sure. And you know, I love what you say about, the people wearing the multiple hats. I've seen it myself for years. For us, it's the athletic trainer who's the weather contact, and I'm like, gosh, man. I mean, that's got to be tough. I mean, we have. How is that happening? Like, what's what's the reason that this person is trying to do all of these things? And with anything, with anything in terms of with the schools, it's like if we can get folks to have a little bit more laser focus on the safety component, like you said, trying to get a person like this in every school across the country, it would just be a big step forward. And so I think something else I'm curious about is how, for a guy like you, per se, how what do you think the benefits would be if we could get people to see these early warnings, these early signs of potential life-threatening events happening? How can we? What would the benefit be if you were able to go into a school and say, "Hey, X, Y, and Z is indicating this. We need to prepare for this now, and potentially avoid this down the road." How beneficial would it be if people could take that lens on how they're managing their safety?
Well, it all boils down to data, right? When we, make or write new legislation, it's based usually on a historical event where someone was harmed. It's usually written in blood, right? For lack of a better way to explain that, right? So I think that what we need to do is we need to start looking at data. The data will tell you who is on a pathway to violence. And it doesn't it doesn't always mean homicidal. It could be self-harm. And this leads into my next point is if you look at historical data, I do a presentation that breaks down. There's been 43 assassination attempts and 43 assassinations since 1865, when the United States Secret Service was formed, April
Wow, I
14th,
didn't know that.
1865. Do you know what Lincoln's last act is? A little trivia question. You know what Lincoln's last act of legislation was?
No.
The day that he was assassinated is the day that he developed the United States Secret Service, April 14th, 1865.
Wow.
No kidding, right? Pretty
Wow.
eerie.
That is.
Now, at the
So
time,
it's
he
like
didn't
he
know.
knew.
Well, I mean, at the time, the service's primary mission was to thwart counterfeit currency and protect the financial interest of the United States. And it wasn't until 1901, when McKinley was assassinated, that it became a dual purpose mission. And we've had that dual purpose mission, or the agency's had that dual purpose mission since then. But my point is that of those 43, I take 15 and I break those down, and they're the more common ones that people know of, like, JFK, RFK, McKinley, Lincoln, um, Gerald Ford. People don't realize that he had two attempts on his life, back to both Bushes, and they go, wait, Bush had an assassination attempt, Junior? Yeah, he did, Tbilisi, Georgia, 2005. Man threw
Wow.
a hand grenade towards the podium. But my point is that of those 15 that I examined, 9 of those 15 had designated or had a diagnosed mental illness. Okay, and were suicidal. And then so I take and I examine X amount of um, mass shootings and attacks in the United States in modern history. And what we found, based upon my statistics and historical information, is that of those 15 and the 11 additional, 72% of those individuals who were homicidal were also suicidal. And so my point is this: what if we started pulling data on coworkers and students, not punitively, and just started looking at behavioral patterns? Is there academics that's usually at a A plus? Is it now at a C or a D or an F over a period of 30 days? Is someone's work performance, who's usually a top performer over a period of time, are they now, at a, not performing? Something is going on in that person's life, right? We have to engage that person in a non-punitive and a therapeutic way to say, what's going on? How can we help you? Right?
Hmm.
And so I always ask the question, do you know how many suicides occurred last year between the ages of 10 and 24 in the United States? Any guess? Number?
I would guess it would be in the hundreds.
6,500 plus.
Wow.
Okay. How many deaths by firearms on campuses, U.S. campuses, K-12 and universities, do you think we had last year?
That's again. I mean,
Just a
from
quick
what
guess.
yeah, from what I know, a dozen.
144. Okay.
Wow. So we're
So
shooting
let's look
low
at
here.
this. 6,500 plus suicides, 144 deaths by firearm on campuses in the U.S. Okay.
That's just in a
If
year.
that's in 1 year. Okay. So if this is 144, and these are the attackers who conducted the 144 deaths, 72% of them were also suicidal. Okay. If we can start addressing suicide and mental health in the United States, we're going to organically reduce the number of people who want to commit murder. So why is it that every year when we see funding come out, it's towards active shootings and not suicide? And I'm not saying that active shootings is not important. I'm just saying that if we address the mental health issue
Yep.
and we really focus on getting people help, they don't want to harm themselves, and they damn sure don't want to commit homicide. We're going to organically reduce the 144 deaths by addressing mental health. And
Yep.
so proactive data analysis that we already have. I go into schools all the time. We've been in close to 1,000 schools now in the United States. I tell the principals and I tell the superintendents, go into your student information systems database. Have someone start pulling analytics and data to show these anomalies in academic performance, attendance rating. We know that that is a contributing factor. Start watching those kids who have traditionally been an A and now they're failing, or start watching those kids who usually have a very good attendance rating and now they're well below what the state standard is. Go ask them, tap them on the shoulder, ask them what's going on. Something's happening in their life to make them behave the way that they're behaving. It could be as simple as that, just getting them off that pathway to violence. And so, same thing with weather. The weather is one of the most commonly overlooked things that we see when we do our assessments. We ask, what processes and protocols or continuity of operations do you have in place for weather? What systems are you using? Oh, we're using the weather service to give us alerts? No, you need something more advanced,
Hmm.
something simple, a BAM weather,
Hmm.
to help you, guide you. Just 3 weeks ago, we had tornadoes come through the Midwest, right?
Yep.
Good friend of mine who works for me, he had to make decisions based upon weather alerts, and I'm glad that he did. He made some decisions that saved people's lives based upon weather alerts that he was receiving from an outside source. These are things that we have to talk about. Weather is commonly overlooked. Another thing that's commonly overlooked is bus safety and security. People don't talk about that. You've got a rolling classroom on every bus, if not more. Think
Yeah.
about it. 48 kids on one bus, one person takes over a single bus. That's the worst school tragedy, event tragedy in the history of the United States, with 48 victims right there.
Right.
So these are the things that people need to start thinking about, and one last point. I don't know you get to your other question, but one of the things I'll tell people also, there's two things that will help you. You need to remain calm. If you're the person making these decisions, remain calm. It will probably save more lives than you hastily making a decision. Remain calm, think it through. The few seconds or a minute that you have to just, you know, control yourself and make a solid decision will probably be worth it, right? So
Yep.
remain calm. That's the
Yep.
first thing. The second thing is the service used to always tell us, no plan survives first contact. You have to have a baseline plan. If you don't have at least a baseline plan and you're prioritizing cameras or access control over even having a plan, you're well behind, right?
Hmm.
Even when you have the best written plan, we don't dictate the time or the location of where the event's going to happen. So while you're remaining calm, you should also be flexible, adapt, and overcome to be able to consciously make good decisions. So I hope that helps people.
Oh man, it's excellent. It's excellent information. One of my last kind of questions to you to pull this all back around is you talked about data and needing, you know, and I agree, is is needing data. From your perspective, what benefits come from integrating, let's use weather for example, better weather information into safety and security management plans for schools? So if a school had, the data that, this is the number of severe weather days you're going to deal with, this is the number of lightning, this is the number of wind events, um, what do we think, how could we get that data to schools, and or if they had it, I guess, how could it help them? Because what I'm worried about, Mike, right now is, the National Weather Service is facing defunding, and they're shrinking down. And a lot of these schools do rely on that for safety, for updates and things to keep them ahead of information on tornadoes and wind and hail and all the things. What happens when that resource goes away and that person that's wearing the 15 hats doesn't have what they need to get it? What do you think we could do there to help the schools understand that component?
Well, I think that if I were BAM Weather, I would be running analytics and putting together a statistics sheet showing them that there is a greater frequency of decisions that they would be making on a weekly, monthly, daily basis that's surrounding weather. People don't understand all of the decisions that have to be made on behalf of a campus or a district because of all of the moving parts. I mean, if you look at just a school's athletic department,
Mm-hmm.
how many events are they having on a weekly basis where weather is part of that decision making process? Whether they play, they not play, they travel, they don't travel. Um, if you could pull together statistics in that geographic region, and show them that it is more likely that they will be making weather-related decisions on a weekly basis rather than an active, shooting threat. I think that that's where the value lies. And then if you compare active shooting threat mitigation cost with, a service like BAM, um, I think that it will make sense to them. And so, I would be highly encouraged to continue to provide that data to them, show them. I think, when you show people hard data, it's hard to refute, right? And if
Yeah.
you show them how frequently they're going to be relying on a service to provide better informed, decisions, to me, it's a no-brainer. And so, yeah, the fact is that you, as much as active shootings get attention from the national media, there's so many suicides, there's so many weather events, there's so many other things that happen on university and K-12 campuses that don't get that attention, that are equally as dangerous. Uh, and so, we have to realize that a lot of this stuff is listen, I work with a lot of victims, and
Mhm.
I would never want to be in their shoes, but the likelihood of an active shooting on a campus is very low, statistically, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't prepare for it.
Right.
But on a more frequent basis, we're going to be dealing with other things like weather events, that we need to be doing on a daily basis. So we need to make sure that we have those protocols in place, and that there's the effective management that can make those decisions, and not just someone that just needs to fill a gap and wear a different hat.
Yep. Dude, that's so good, because I think that's the thing we always try to do, and I know it's what you're doing too. Is if we can take a hat or two off these people and make and help make those decisions for them, that ultimately are the goal is to protect people. That's the goal. Protect the people, protect the property as much as possible. There are, for those of you listening, there are those resources out there. Like they're there, and we're right here. I mean, it's those types of things are possible, and there's nothing just more derailing and deflating than someone that's trying to make 15 different decisions, and do 15 different jobs, and only getting paid to do one of them. And then when you make that decision for one of those other areas, and it's the wrong one, that's tough. It's not anything anyone wants to live with. So, Mike, we could talk about this for a really long time, and I would love to talk again. If we can meet a few more times and discuss this type of stuff. I think people are very interested in this. It's real and it happens every day. But from all of us here, I mean, Mike, we really appreciate your time to spend and come on here and share your expertise with us and your insights. And Mike, if someone listening, if they're more interested in getting more of this data, this security, and the feeling of being protected, how could they get in touch with you?
Yeah, it's easy. The company's M6 Global Defense. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to me direct at Matranga, Matranga, at m6globaldefense.com, or you can just go and go to the info at m6globaldefense.com. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I
Awesome.
promise you, I have a policy that I will respond within a few hours. So you will
Nice.
get a response from me.
Awesome. And Brett, we'll be sure to put that in the podcast description so you guys can reach out to Mike if any of you are interested. And guys, this has been another very intriguing episode, thought-provoking episode of Beyond the Forecast, and I hope to have more of these discussions going forward. So share it with a friend if it brought you any value today. Make sure you send it to somebody, and give us a review there on the podcast. And we'll be back next week with more. Mike, thank you again, sir, and you all have a great day, guys.
Take care.